now on to our guest speaker. Mark, if you want to start coming on up here. Just a reminder to you all that one of Mark's books that he's going to be talking about somewhat today, Wild Plants and Survival Lore, Secrets of the Forest. This is our book club book. Our next book club meeting is October 12th at 4 p.m. It is via Zoom, and Lee has been sending out the link for it. So watch for emails from Lee titled Book Club, and join us for our book club. It's always a good time. So Mark Warren was here with us in May, and for the first part of his talk, and has come back. But in case you forgot, and Ben couldn't be here today, so I'm playing his role too. Mark is a naturalist, composer, prolific author, and director of the nationally renowned wilderness school called Medicine Bow, which is a 35-acre wilderness school in the Chattahoochee National Forest near Dahlonega. Mark guides his students towards their own unique relationship with nature through the earth lore accumulated by the American Native Indians. Mark is a lifelong student of nature and primitive lore. He grew up in the Piedmont of Georgia and loved the forest. After graduating from the University of Georgia in art and chemistry / pre-med, he served 10 years as a naturalist, environmental educator at the Georgia Conservancy, and 17 years as wilderness director for High Meadows Camp. He's packed 50 years of teaching and knowledge about Native Americans' everyday life skills into a 4-volume series of books titled Secrets of the Forest, of which this is the first edition, the first book in the series. And without further ado, Mark Warren. Hello.
Thank you.
Mark, come up here, please. You have to speak to the computer now.
I have to stay there.
Yep, you got to stay here. Sorry.
So now I've got to talk really.
Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, so the acoustics in the room are good.
And the people in the back row here?
No. Can't hear you. You have to really speak up.
Well, as I started to say, my specialty is the survival skills and lore of the people who once lived where I live now.
Can you move over so that there's see?
The Cherokees were the people who knew our land better than any people as a whole will ever know it again, because they lived intimately with it on a daily basis, and every child, man, and woman knew all of the things I'm about to share with you. If you have a question about some of the things that I'm talking about, please get my attention and let's deal with that question when it's fresh and it's applicable to what's on the screen. Well, let's just go into it. The medicines are what we're going to concentrate on. And the first slide is a fire, because fire is such an important part in the making of many medicines. If you look carefully at that place where the flame is coming from, you see all that little collection of tiny branches. This is a carefully made pyre done by one of my students. It was lighted with one match, which was the goal. And this student will never have to use more than one match again.
On the side.
The sassafras tree is one of the best known medicines of folklore, because it was practiced by all of the pioneers who lived here in Georgia in its early days. If you could go back in time and ask some early Georgia pioneer, and I'm talking about of European descent, not a native, why do you use sassafras as a tea every spring? What's the mechanism going on here? And that person would not have been able to tell you anything. They didn't know. They just said, "Hey, we just do it. And it seems to make us healthier." Well, now we know what it's about. And I'm going to share that with you in just a minute. First, let's just kind of look at this plant and get to know it a bit. Sassafras is famous for having 3 different shapes of leaves. In truth, it comes down to more like 7 shapes of leaves because there are little variations that you can have on them. But I'm going to talk about those 3 most common. See if you can find them as I name them. One of them is simply a football shape, elliptical. One of them looks like a mitten. It's got 1 lobe sticking out to the side and then a big fat lobe. And the other one looks like a double thumb mitten. And that's the one that my students call Casper the Friendly Ghost. Can you see all those?
Yeah.
Okay, there's another tree that has these 3 shapes too. And it's very toxic. And that's called mulberry. Every part of the mulberry tree is toxic except for the ripe fruit. The unripe fruit is very toxic too. Here's the difference. Mulberry leaves are serrate all around the edge. They have saw teeth all the way around. Sassafras has none. Mulberry leaves have a scratchy feel, like a man's cheek after the end of the day. Okay. So with that, you should be able to tell the 2 apart. You wouldn't make that mistake. The sassafras root was the source of the medicine here. It was simply a tea, very easy to make. You can simmer a root, or you can simply just soak a root in hot water. And it really doesn't matter your dosage because you can go by color. Let's say, for example, that you've got a big jar about this tall, that big around. Well, if you boil water all by itself, drop your piece of sassafras root. Maybe it's a piece that's about the size of, half of a writing pencil, something like that. And you score that with your knife, giving it slits so the chemicals can get out. And you just put that in that jar. You take your just boiled water and pour it into that. You can fill it up. And when the water turns pink all over the jar, and that may need some stirring so you can see that, then you can remove that root. That batch is done. And then you can put that root in wrap it up in foil or something, put it in your refrigerator, use it again later. All right, here's what it does. This is what we now know. And part of the importance of this lesson today is that I'm not giving you the folklore, except as an anecdote. What I'm going to do is give you what's been proven, so you can feel very confident about using this. That's what I love. I love the modern research that verifies what we're doing, because there's so much wrong information in many books, especially things like coffee table books that are there for show, more or less. And they go through things so generally, never specifically. Sassafras took a real beating back in the 70s because the Surgeon General put it on the list of foods that were carcinogenic. And here's what they did to prove that. They separated all the chemicals in a lab, and they took the one chemical from that, which we already knew was carcinogenic, and that's called saffrole, and that's in black pepper. They separated it so that it was pure saffrole. They injected it into laboratory rats, and listen to this next word, until the rats developed tumors. Okay, so it was inordinate amounts that went in. I wonder if there's anything that would not cause a tumor with the right amount of concentration and repetition in injecting it, because cancer, in one way, you can think of it as a result of an irritation. I've read some events in history in modern history, where people have gotten cancer in the oddest ways, such as a man working on a conveyor belt. And every time something came down the line, he reached down to pick it up to do one thing to it. And every time he did it, the belt slid across his finger. And that's where he got cancer. After many, many years of that. You can get cancer of the eardrum from listening to too loud music over years. So the irritation factor is something people don't think about too often, but it's a good way to think about it. Saffrol with its other components in sassafras is not dangerous. And everyone knows that now in the herbal circles. The listing that went on that carcinogenic, harmful components back in the 70s took all the sassafras products off the shelf. And there are some back now. But here's what we know about it. Because it does have saffrol in it, your immune system gets cranked up. You know, it's aware of some substance in the body that it might possibly have to do battle with. So it makes the immune system boost. You've heard of that term before, immune booster.
To interrupt you, can everyone just take one moment and put your phones on silent? Just take 1 second. Thank you.
So that's exactly why this is a good spring tonic. Springtime is the time for certain spring allergies with people. And this is something that can set you up to be more protected from all of that. But listen what's been discovered more lately in our lifetime. That very same tea, the one you can so easily make because all you're doing is looking for the color of that water to know that it's ready. By heating up 1 little cup of that to drink, you are also getting an incredible lifesaver should you be in the position of having eaten something gone bad or drunk bad water. That can put you down. If you're in a wilderness situation, you know, which is something that is always in my mind, in my teachings, it could be the very thing that did you in. If you were desperate for water because maybe you were lost or whatever, and you drank from someplace, even water coming from the ground can be contaminated, even out in the wilderness these days, because of all the things that drift out over the world from our factories and whatever, and our cars. You can get sick with dysentery. You get microbes in you that are alien to our bodies and are enemies to us, and they make you sick. 1 cup of that sassafras tea resolves that completely. It kills all the bacteria in your gut. Now, that's not a good thing, is it? Because you want to have that good bacteria, but sometimes you have to do that to solve your problem. And sassafras is the resolution to that. In the springtime, when the leaves first come out, you can eat them at that time, and they're very good. Has anybody here ever had Fruit Loops cereal? That's the taste. I'd never had it either, but children kept telling me that, so I finally had to try some, and it's right on. It's Fruit Loops. It's delicious. You can take mature leaves and bundle them up. You can do this right now. If you've got a sassafras at home, take off green leaves, tie them together, a bundle of them with yarn, and then tack it up in a doorway inside your house. There it's going to dry with ventilation and no direct sunlight. In 2 weeks, it's dry. Next time you make a soup, crumble all that in to your soup and let it cook in there and watch what happens. That soup thickens up. It's a gumbo. You ever had the Cajun food gumbo filet? That's the gumbo. It gives it a flavor. Sassafras is one of our very crooked growing trees. You seldom see a straight one. In our area, you don't find very many big trees. The biggest one around me is a real champ, and it's this big around in the National Forest. It's so neat because the bark is insecticidal, and nuthatches use the trunk of that tree to store their nuts there. They'll chip out a little niche and store their food there because the insects won't get to it. Anybody have any questions about sassafras? Yes.
What sort of habitat or niche does the sassafras work?
You can find sassafras in deep woods. Yeah, it's actually a very common tree, but when you find one, you'll find others more than likely, because this is one of those trees that prefers to reproduce asexually, underground, meaning a rhizome. I assume you folks are familiar with that word, a rhizome. underground stem. And so a clone pops up. So what we're actually seeing, since these are stems underground, we're actually seeing branches that we're calling trees. But it's okay. It's all one organism. And you'll see a fence of sassafras growing. I bet you've seen that with river cane before. It makes just it marches. You know, you get, it looks like they just marched out to make a flank. Sassafras does that too. It's fun to follow through the forest to see where it goes. Yes.
It doesn't have to be.
Say again.
It doesn't have to be, right? Backyard,
Right. Right. Sure.
anywhere.
It could be anywhere. Yeah. Yeah. I'm always thinking in terms of wilderness. So there's no special place. I see it grow in high ground. I see it grow in low ground, just wherever. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
You know why they wanted to villainize trees and like so the show general, like they kind of went out of their way to make that report.
It was Edwin, the Surgeon General was Edwin Coop, and that was sort of his claim to fame. While he was in his office, he tested everything. But you know what was not revealed because of very strong lobbying in Washington? It was not revealed that 1 can of beer is 14 times as carcinogenic as 1 cup of sassafras tea. He checked everything. He probably checked things you'll never hear about or not even know what they were, but he came out with that gristly edge of a grilled hamburger as carcinogenic. So that was a long list. Why he did it, I don't know. But the fact that he isolated that compound was truly an unfair way to go about the test. Anyone else have a question?
You
Yes.
said it's insecticidal. Can you use it in some way for your garden? That way?
In your garden, I don't think so, unless you found a dead sassafras and you could chip it and chew it up and spread that as your mulch. That might help. As far as a repellent goes, the best way to prepare this is take charcoal from your campfire and crush it up, and then crush up leaves of sassafras with that and apply that to your body. That's one of the many repellents that are useful in the forest. But I should mention that you always have to test yourself first with any repellent from the wild to make sure you're not allergic to it. And the way to do that is to rub some of that repellent into a non-calloused part of your body. This is a convenient one, and give it 20 minutes. If you have a little rash there, then that's your signal. You can't use that particular one, but there are plenty of others. This is the wonder plant with the wonder medicine. Nobody seems to have really parsed this down to the actual mechanics of what goes on. But jewelweed, also called impatiens or touch me not, this is our wild impatiens. I'm sure everybody here knows very well the potted impatiens that are grown. It also works as the medicine that I'm about to describe to you. If you crush any part of the jewelweed and apply it to your skin, and this is something you don't have to test for allergy to. This is your friend already, even though you might not know it. It works like cortisone, but it works like that. It's amazing. Whenever I have a plant class and we go down to the edge of my meadow, where it loves to grow, it likes a lot of light and shade, kind of the border, and it likes to have a good wet place. Well, we go down there and I always ask, does anyone here have a chigger bite or a mosquito bite or anything that itches, poison ivy rash? There's usually someone. So we have a testimonial we can do right there. I usually like to take a piece of the stem because it's so full of juice, and you just crush it up, very slimy, what a botanist would call mucilaginous, and then rub that onto the problem, and the itch disappears in every instance within 2 seconds. And it just amazes people. So you've got something that works better than cortisone. And by the way, cortisone, is stressful on your adrenal glands. This is not. This is only used topically. You don't ingest this. Those flowers, as you can see, are well constructed for hummingbirds. I don't know if you can see in that picture from where you are, but the tapered end of that flower, which is kind of shaped like a cornucopia basket, is curled under. You see how the leaves look like they have scallop shapes around the edge? See how the serration there looks rounded? Can you look real closely and see little tiny bristles, a little lighter color, sticking off the end of each of those rounded teeth? Can anybody see that? Let me point one out. I'll be back.
Yeah, real careful with that cable.
See them?
Yeah.
If you could just see a little light color there, then looking at it. That's one identifier for you. That's one that you usually don't find in the books. And here's the best one. If you don't handle a leaf with your fingers, but snap it off by its leaf stalk, put it under water in sunlight, you will not believe your eyes. You won't believe me when I tell you this, but I'll tell you anyway. It looks like aluminum foil. It's that bright. I hope you'll do that. Those are great little identifier tricks. Anybody know what's called touch me not? Once the flower has been pollinated, it becomes this little odd shaped plump seed, and it grows with tension in its sections. And when you bump it, the seam breaks and the seeds spring out. It launches its seeds. And you know all about that. The plight of plants to get their seeds dispersed away from them. That's just one of them. Another good identifier, almost every time you find a jewelweed patch, look down at one individual plant and you'll see that it looks like it's standing on its tiptoes. It's got arching roots that run from the stem down, and they're almost always full of pink pigment. The stem is very soft. It's a succulent. Right now, at this time of the year, it's almost woody. It's much harder to get juice out of it. So this time of the year, you'd need to use the leaves. And it won't be long before we don't have the use of it anymore, for this season at least. Anyone have any questions about it? They did a scientific experiment on this curing poison ivy rash, and it was a beautiful, beautiful result. It proved they had a control group and they had the group that used jewelweed. Everybody had poison ivy, and everybody in the jewelweed group had their rash disappear in 2 to 3 days. Everybody in the control group, 2 weeks. And you know how poison ivy is maddening. So, and it gives you immediate relief from it. It's almost magical how quickly it works. Any questions about jewelweed?
Yes, I have.
Okay. If you have poison ivy, you're going to want to apply it 2 or 3 times a day. For chigger bites, just for probably a day, apply it a few times. But you'll get, the nice thing is you do get relief with one treatment. And then as hours go by, you might feel the need for more. Just keep using it. There are a lot of claims about making salves with jewelweed in it. I've not experienced one myself that actually works. The only way I know to preserve jewelweed's medicinal properties is to do a quick freeze on it. In other words, you take the entire plant home with you, clean it up, put it in your blender with water, blend it up, and immediately pour it into an ice tray and put it in your freezer. Then you've got ice cubes you can use with jewelweed in them. What a great applicator. Yes.
What months is it in bloom, the flowers? In bloom?
Right now, there are still a few in bloom, but mostly they were in bloom, say 2 weeks ago or so.
And for how long?
Oh gosh, for each plant, it's hard to say because, you know, when I look at my patch, I'm not looking at the same flowers all the time. So I'm not sure. I would guess that the flowers are probably present for maybe a week and a half to 2 weeks. Anybody else have a question? Okay. One of the great things about a medicine like this, if your child or someone you know has a problem out in nature that this could resolve, take them to this patch, sit them down and talk to them about how it works, all it does is it tells your immune system to calm down, just like cortisone does. And it does it in a locale where you apply it. You know, the bumps of poison ivy, you know why they form? From your immune system. It's crowding white blood cells and lymph into that area, and it stretches the skin and it makes it itch. So applying it right there relaxes all that, stops the itch right away. This one is not native, but it's all over our country now. It came from Europe, probably arriving here in the hulls of ships, which were filled with soil for ballast. And then when the ship had to be repaired over here, had to be dry docked, first thing you got to do is shovel all that dirt out. That's the way a lot of our plants got here from Europe. Broadleaf plantain is one of the most revered plants by herbalists today. It's one of the most common weeds in people's yards. It loves to grow on hard packed soil. So the first place it showed up in America because of human traffic was on the trails between colonies. Think about a trail, that's hard packed soil. So it was a perfect venue for the seeds dropping off of people's clothing and they didn't even know it. So the first time that the native people saw this plant in their lives was when it cropped up on these trails. And because it seemed to come up wherever the white man walked, they called this white man's foot. Now, here's the best part of the story. Guess who taught the white man how to use it? The more primitive-minded Native American. They didn't have to look it up somewhere or ask somebody about it. They had an instinct about it. Isn't that amazing? What if we all had that still today? Well, I wouldn't be up here. You wouldn't need me. You'd know all this. Let me tell you how to use this. First of all, it's a wonderful anti-inflammatory food. You can eat these leaves raw or cooked as you would cook a green. And they're one of those wonderful foods that as you just eat them, not taking them as a pill or a tincture or anything like that, just like ginger root, just by eating it, you gain the anti-inflammatory properties. And inflammation has become one of the major issues in American health, hasn't it? Things that we don't even know how to cure yet. They're inflammatory. Many of those, yes.
I'm guessing the best time that would spring.
You can eat it all through the summer. In the spring, you're going to be getting more tender young leaves, easier to chew, but you could eat these right now. And if it's too tough for you, steam it, soften it up a little bit. Now, aside from being anti-inflammatory, and by the way, you can use that topically as well. Say you had a swelling from whatever, maybe it's a bite. You can crush up leaves or chew up leaves and just apply them right there. And it works as a poultice on an inflammation. If it's a bee sting, it draws out the venom. This is what it's most famous for. This is your best scenario of working with a child right there. Child gets stung by an insect, and now nature is the enemy. Well, correct that. Take that child to broadleaf plantain, sit down and learn that plant. And here's a way that you can absolutely be sure you've got the correct one. You can see that it's got parallel veins, meaning it's an ancient type of plant. The first veination of plants was that pattern. And then they developed, they got more complicated as time went on. Also, if you notice, there is no stem. These leaves only come from the top of the root. So that's called a basal rosette. The only thing you see standing up are flower stalks, which are now in this picture, seed stalks or fruit stalks, because they've been pollinated. Here's how you can guarantee you've got the correct plant. If it's basal, a basal rosette, if it's got parallel veins, pluck one leaf right from the root and then grip it on the stalk and the base of the leaf and very patiently pull the leaf tissue apart, and you'll be left with the taut little veins in there. It'll start looking like a guitar to you as you pull it. You got to be very patient. And then you could just dangle that leaf by its veins. You're holding the stalk. The seeds of this plant contain psyllium, Psyllium, a mucilaginous roughage that you sometimes buy. It's sold by itself as a roughage to help clean out the intestines. And while it's doing that, guess what it grabs onto and takes out of your body? Cholesterol. So this is a highly prized compound inside the seeds there. And the seeds also contain the B vitamins that can make you insect repellent, your whole body, by eating the top, say, inch of a spike of these seeds every day through the summer. And you get an insect repellency from the inside out. In other words, you begin to taste in a way that's repellent to an insect. They're still going to bite you, but they're going to immediately back off from the taste. Any questions on that? Right. One of my favorites and most used medicines during my workshops has been red maple. You've got a phalanx of them standing out in front of this building. They're very common. Got some sugar maples and some red maples. Red maple is one of the most common trees of our hardwood forests. It is by far the best medicine for serious third-degree burns or any other lesser burn I have ever used, including anything I've ever gotten from a pharmacy. It's so easy to make it. All you have to do is collect green leaves and fill up a container that will hold water, and then boil water separately. Once it's boiled, you pour that into your container with the leaves. And now you can't just let it sit like you would with dried leaves, because diffusion will not happen. Diffusion requires drying first. If you put green leaves into hot water, the chemicals inside the green leaves are completely content to be inside the green leaf. They have no need to get out into the other water. So we have to make a little blunt instrument, or maybe you've got something, a baseball bat would do it. And you crush, and you crush to get those chemicals out. And you crush until that water is cool enough to put on a burn, because you never put anything hot on a burn. The relief from pain is immediate. I can't tell you how many tearful faces I've seen just break into a smile. And this includes adults. If the burn is somewhere on your body where you can't immerse it, then put a rag in there and then just gently wring it out and lie down, put the rag on wherever that burn is, and just stay there for about 15 minutes and let it soak in. Here's what happens when you use this solution from maple. First, the pain relief. Second, this solution stimulates / agitates the living cells at the border of the burn, causing them to reproduce right away. That's called healing. And so the healing process is just kick-started by this. The third thing is, once the water evaporates from your skin, it leaves a film over the burn so that now you've got a bandage to protect it from secondary infection. Once you've used this, put it in a jar, put it in the refrigerator. I don't really know how long it would last, but I know it will last a while. It would last at least a couple of months. Anyone have any questions about maple? Okay.
Try to incorporate this in your life all the time.
Oh yeah, this is.
Go out, collect.
These are things that I use, and I'm not trying to tell you that I'm completely living in the wild. I mean, we go to the grocery store, we buy toilet paper. But yeah, this is something I use a lot in my work, especially. And if I had a burn at home, I would do the same exact thing. I would walk outside. We live in the woods, so I just walk outside and get what I needed. I just and I'll tell you a little secret. I usually don't say this in a program because it's a little bit pushing the limit on safety, perhaps. So take this with a grain of salt, okay? Once I was out remote enough that I didn't have time to make a container in order to make this solution. In other words, I didn't have time to burn out a bowl from dead wood, which takes hours. So I took a very bad burn from, I was sealing the end of a piece of rope with a match. And little did I know there was water inside the core of this rope, and it just popped. And a little flaming meteorite of plastic came and landed on my hand. And it was just like napalm. It started burning through me and kept going. And it hurt. So I thought, what the heck? I'm going to try a shortcut here. And I took a maple leaf and just chewed it up. Now, that's not recommended to put in your mouth, but I was kind of desperate. And I just ground it into that crater that was going through my hand. And I didn't get the relief in 2 seconds like I'm accustomed to getting. So I thought, well, this doesn't work. So then I spat and spat and spat to clean my mouth out, washed my mouth out with water. 15 minutes later, pain gone. I know that pain would not have been gone had I not done that because of the nature of that burn. Anybody else have a question? Yes.
So it has to be the green when they're green? Or
Green.
when they're red?
Green. That's when all the chemicals there. When it's red, much of the chemicals inside have dissipated, and that's why you get to see that color. You know, that color was always in the leaf, and now you lose the chloroplast, and you can see the color that was always in there. Did someone else have a question? Yeah.
Has this ever been commercialized that you know of?
No, it hasn't. Isn't that amazing? Here's a great moment that I remember. I'm walking through the forest with one of the higher ups in the National Forest Service, the U.S. National Forests, okay? And we're just having conversations about whatever we see. And he just says this out of the blue. You know, if there was one tree I would make disappear with a magic wand, it would be maple. It's just in the way. So we had a little conversation after that.
Or this in first?
Yeah, good idea. Too bad I wasn't a smoker. I could have gone, you're about to find out. Okay, how many people in here ever suffer from a migraine headache? Okay, you're about to learn about your best friend. I know this sounds very exaggerated, but I'm not going to exaggerate. I promise you. The dogwood tree has been known for centuries as being a wonderful fever reducer. Okay. The inner bark, which is the layer just under this little puzzle piece outer bark. This, by the way, was called by the Cherokee the alligator tree. You can see why looking at its bark. They even made up a myth about it, that the alligators came up from South Georgia in the swamps, and they discovered the foothills here. And then they went on up to the mountains. They were more impressed there. Sorry, but that's the way it is. And they decided, we're going to stay here. This is beautiful. We've never seen anything but flat ground and some dunes, maybe. So they stayed here, and the first winter came along, and they couldn't handle the cold. So they turned into trees to survive. Now, of course, that's a story. And it's really the complete opposite of what science would teach us. You know, if anything would be able to survive, it should be something cold-blooded. But they use that in their story for a lesson. This tree story is about the lowering of temperature and survival. And if you think of it in terms of fever, lowering your fever, that is survival. In those days, taking a fever down was all important. We just take it for granted now, don't we, that we can get rid of a fever. You just pop a couple of aspirin. Well, in those days, if fever got up to 104 and higher, that's when brain cells start being destroyed. And you have to bring that back down. And so the inner bark of this does that. Cornic acid is the working component here. Here's the thing that's been discovered more recently. And I have seen this now successful 11 times in a row. So I'm a believer. I've never had a migraine, but I've been there with the person. I made up the tea for them, that very same tea of the inner bark. You do this from a branch. You never do this from the trunk. That does too much damage. So you go to a branch on the south side of the tree. That's also a favorite to the tree because that's the side that gets the most sun. And that keeps fungus from growing there. And right now we have a fungus that is allowing anthrax to hitchhike on it, and it's killing all of our dogwoods. If you have a dogwood out in your lawn, great. That one will probably survive because it's out in the sun. But the dogwoods in the forest are dying. Just go out and take a look at all that are dead now. And next year there'll be more dead. But that inner bark is the next layer down. The outer bark on the branch will be gray and somewhat smooth. The very next layer, you will see a one cell thick greenish color, one cell thick. That's the cambium. Many books incorrectly tell you that the cambium is the inner bark. It's a part of the inner bark. The rest of the inner bark is maybe 1/8 of an inch of living tissue. And that's the part of the tree that carries chemicals from the leaves down to the roots. The reason we can use that and not the leaves is because all trees are designed genetically to hold back some chemicals in the leaf and let other chemicals go down. And usually the ones in the leaf are toxins to protect the leaf from being eaten. And you can count on the tree to filter this out correctly. So the chemical that goes down the tree, one of those is cornic acid. That's what we want. But we don't want some of the other chemicals that are in the leaf. So we take a ribbon of inner bark the size of the little finger outlined of the patient. What I like to do is go twice as long and half as wide. It's the same amount of medicine and it does less damage to the branch. Because the more you girdle a branch, the more you destroy it, right? Just like girdling the bottom of a tree like beaver do. That can kill the whole tree. So by putting that into a cup, boiling water separately, adding that water in, wait 20 minutes for the liquid to ease its way into the water, and you have the migraine solution. And I've seen this on 11 different occasions, make all symptoms go away in 45 minutes or less. And the symptoms don't return for that episode. So any questions on that before I end up? Because I've run out of time. All right, quickly, I want to just say that all my books are over there. I hope you'll come take a look. And I've written these nonfiction series, as you were told, about all of my work. I poured all my career into that series. But you know what I am at heart is a novelist. I've always been that way. But my novels take their information from what I know about these things. So they're part of my work in the fiction as well. And I'm going to mention one of those. I've got several of them over there, but one of them I'm going to mention because it just it gave me the great honor of being one of the Georgia Authors of the Year. It's called Song of the Horseman, and it's about a Cherokee horse trainer who has all that knowledge of traditionally passed down to him through his people. Thank you for your time today.
And I want to remind everyone that this is the book, Secrets of the Forest, Volume 1, Wild Plants and Survival Lore, that we'll be reading for our next book club on October 12th. And is some of the what you've talked about today in this book?
Everything I've said today is in this book.
There you go. You have a manual to look everything up now. All right. Thank you so much.